Hey folks, Green Stuff Gav here. So we're going to start with some of the Warhammer Combat Patrol that we've been receiving. Now, while the Tyranids I'm not bothered by, is we've seen I collect Lamenters, and they're pretty much been rendered holy legends thanks to the new Blood Angels decks. So, because no one commented on chapters other than Alhouse suggested Blood Angels and Dionzi suggested Blood Ravens, I've decided to go for somewhere in the middle, go for the Lamenters. And yeah, we've got the captain here, so we're going to start with him. Now, my Lamenters are all on deck plate basing, so we're going to start by gluing some plastic art, textured plastic art to the base, and that can have time to dry while we work. Now, I know I want the standard body, but I'm going to potentially be reposing the arms. So we can see here, I'm just clipping off the main body, the bit I know I'm not really going to change. Going to clear off all of the moulding lugs, and you get some weird mould lines in some places with these flowing capes. So just take some time to clean up. Also clean up the lugs underneath where the arms peg in, because we're going to be need those clear for when we repose. Doing the same on the rest of the torso. Again, just tidying up. Dry fit here, just it's always important to dry fit. I could follow the instructions, but for such a simple minute, it's not really worthwhile. So just now and then, just push things together, see how they fit. Interestingly, the front half links to the cape, but there's nothing holding the back leg in. Now that I've seen it, I've realised there's a nub in the where the neck should go, and that needs to come off because we're going to be replacing the head. I've already decided I don't want a bare head. Now, I've found a Terminator head from the Bits box that seems to fit in all right, which is nice. But also found a Primaris head helmet just to see what it looks like. Sometimes you just got to put these bits together and see which you prefer. So while I'm contemplating, I'm going to get the rest of the legs done. So he's got this great big bit of Tyranid on the base that doesn't really fit. So I'm going to get the legs assembled and see how well he stands on a base. This will determine if how much of the foot I need to cut. Talking of which, we're just going to trim all the plastic art off. Pair of scissors, easy as that, and then just a knife to tidy up the edges. And we see here, you can see he's supposed to be stood on one foot, but I'm just seeing how much of a contact point I've got when he's glued on, and there's enough there. If I was doing it for a competition or anything like that, I'd repose the legs slightly and cut the feet down, but it's just not needed. Now, the Terminator Captain can take his Stormbolter and Power Swords, or a Combi Bolter or Power Fist. So I know I'm going to need at least half the Stormbolter, but so just sort of getting an eye on how it's supposed to be posed, then any tweaks. Found a Power Fist out. I'm in an R in about having point in, but I think the Power Fist is just too small. Could have done with the Centurion Power Fist, I think, and that would have looked a lot better. So it'll be his sword, and he'll have a Combi Bolter as well. I did look at replacing the sword, but I quite like it. So there's a slight tweak to the pose, though, because he's going to be more gesturing forward with his bolter. So the swords had to come in slightly. And here we got the other half, the Stormbolter. I found a flamer adapter from one of the Heresy Dreadnoughts. I think that works well. Now, we could theoretically cut off the rest of the Stormbolter's magazine and replace it with a fuel tank, but I think that's a bit too much for what it is. So we're going to trim down the heresy bits, the heresy barrel, get it nice and straight, check the fit. Again, dry fit everything just to make sure. You see here, I'm making sure it's all straight, just manoeuvring it while the glue's still wet. And then because we're reposing, I'm having to glue the arm in place. Now the arms are in place, I'm looking at the helmet, just sort of manoeuvring the helmet, testing it, deciding how I like it. There's a few options there till I stick some glue in. Make sure it's nice and straight. Just a little bit extra time helps get the pose right. Now we're dry fitting the shoulder pads, clean up all the bits. Now because we've reposed the arms, the shoulder pads don't actually fit on the lugs, so I tried to brute force it, but at the end they're going to have to just cut the lugs off and then glue it the old fashioned way. So we can see here, just tidying up, getting a nice fit, making sure it looks right. They also fit according onto the elbows, which is quite unusual. So I've decided I don't want two of the tilt plates. I think it's too much, and a bit of asymmetry can work. So cut it off carefully, saved it. Now, thankfully, we can see on the design, Terminator shoulder pads have this little notch cut into them. So we've taken the tilt plate off and we can still see that notch. So we just cleaned it up. And again, realised this won't fit. So we've got to cut all of the nubs off. Then glue it in place. That gives a much more aggressive look, I think, is the arm slightly further in. So Colour Forge Black, as per usual, gorgeous spray, comes out really nice. And we're going to start by dry brushing all the base. I need to go back and redo all of the base in so it's all consistent, because some of it was done in a silver spray, and so it's really, really bright. Whereas I quite like the layered dry brush in here. Also dry brush all the metal bits, because it's easier to do it now and then tidy up with highlights later. I was and over the sword. I was going to do it gold, but I think gold will be too lost because this guy's going to be primarily yellow. So you've got to be aware of your colour choices. Talking of which, Baylor Brown. We did a video where we used Scrag Brown and worked it up to yellow, and that works really well, but that's a very warm yellow, whereas I want a cold yellow here. So Baylor Brown goes straight over black. We can see I'm going careful to leave gaps between details so we get a bit of black line in, but I'm not worried about being too tidy here. I'm just slapping it everywhere, getting a good coverage. We're going to go back with a second coat, but at least we're getting the blocked colour on, so it also helps to spot details and try and decide what colours are going where. Yeah, quite straightforward. You see it's very patchy, but we're not really that worried. Then while it's still wet on the palette, we're going to go in, and again we can see the translucency of acrylic paints here. Same colour, literally still on the palette over the same locations. It gives us a real deeper colour. And we're not going all the way to the edges to give us some shade in. You can certainly see that a lot on the legs where the braces are. The difference of colour. Gives, like I say, gives between the black line and the two different yellowish colours. gives some shading, which is nice. Could theoretically go back, add an ink or a contrast, and then work it up again, but this is going to be a tabletop army. It's not going to be, I don't paint to award-winning standards. So as long as it looks good on the table, that's the important bit to me. See, just keep adding water, keep adding paint to the palette. I'll note that I have put thinners into all my paints anyway, so these aren't stocks just out the pot, because Games Workshop paints are really thick. Yeah, just make sure get all the yellow bits. It'll also help differentiate between like the Imperial Fists yellow, which is a really bright yellow. It's quite dark. And again, a third coat just to tidy up, you know, remove some of the, make sure none of the yellow's patchy. So we're going to do something unusual here, is we're going on to a grey, and we're going to start, everyone knows Lamenters have got this checkered pattern. So I'm going to start by drawing guidelines. They're certainly not tidy, not right, but they'll look all right. And again, so as he's a captain, he should theoretically have a different colour helmet, but I've gone for white for veterans because you can't become a captain without being a veteran. We can certainly see here where I'm drawing, painting on the check pattern. It's yeah, not quite squares, but it's one of those odd ones. If you go for direct squares, then it won't all fit on the pad. So yeah, it's where Lamenters get it dodgy. Now there's some lovely text on the swords, so we're just going to dry brush those bits and then paint the rest of the swords. This is going to be our base colour, so we're going to add white to this later, but we'll get it on now so it can dry. Trying to work out what colour to do next. So I decided to pick out all of the purity seals and things like the eagles in a bone colour. This is Rakarth Flesh, which will get a highlight. So that will, because they're an off-white, they'll stand out from the rest of the, like the helmet and the checker pattern. I go in, I decide that it's, I want the Crux Terminatus, which traditionally is stone, but I've done this in like a sandstone. So it's done slightly darker than the purity seals. So it's Rakarth Flesh with a touch of Scrag Brown. So we can see here is going to go in and do the checks now. This is the bit that's time consuming. Traditionally, people would like draw the boxes, as you can see, then just fill them in. But that actually doesn't give equal boxes, so we're going to go in with the black as well afterwards. So we're trying to keep it as tidy as possible, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't come out, you know, they are not massively tidy. Also picking out the helmet, all the white parts. They'll have another coat as well, but obviously we've gone from grey to white because that will give us a bit of depth to the colour as well. More checks. Ironically, it's quite a lot easier to do on pads without details on. So you see, I'm just taking my time, just picking them out. But we can already see the white squares are slightly bigger than the black squares. So what we do is we go in with the black and then make the black squares slightly bigger. This lets us tidy up the white edge of the white squares and make them a bit more even. I was going to do one on the tilt shield, but I'm going to leave it black. I might do some personal heraldry there, but that could be another time. So again, just see you carefully picking them all out, but the difference it's making having slightly more equal size squares. Now, I'm sure a mathematician will be able to tell you how to get them nice and square across, but I'm not that good. I decided now I'm going to pick out the eyes, because the next batch of white will be tidy up. So we're going to pick out some red bits, things like the targeter on the gun. And then we're going to tidy up all the white bits. So again, some highlights on the helmet where we're using translucent paint gives us a nice colour, a couple of tidy ups. So I'm also doing a round circle. The Lamenters icons, a bleeding heart on a white back circle. So you see here, I'm sticking, while the white's wet on the palette, I'm adding in some turquoise and just doing some wet blending on the blade. Then tidy up of all the stone bits, things like the scroll work, especially on like the pads. I haven't decided a name yet, so if you think there's a really cool Lamenters-esque name that can go on there, let me know. I then go into the sandstone bits and give it just a very light highlight of the Rakarth flesh, so it's darker than the scroll work, but a bit more similar in tone. And we're painting the Lamenters icon here, which is the heart, which is just a V. Now I decided to go in and add some gold. I generally avoid gold because of the yellow, but I think with a shine in Retributor armor, really just in a couple of bits, just helps it pop. That slight metallic. A bit more tidy up on the red. So we see here again the bleeding heart should theoretically have a blend from black to red, but I'm not doing that on 28mm models. It's just too tiny. Also picking out the purity seals, so there is a splash of colour around, and that's where you get your real attention brought to minis. Stippling a really sort of thin white edge highlight to the sword, and again this is quite a brutal highlight, quite sharp, because that gives us that power effect. Then we're on to tidy up, just picking out all the metalworks, just a little bit of a tidy up. Things like the rims on the shoulder pads, the power cables, just a few bits and pieces just to tidy up. It's always nice to have some metallics about. Yeah, and I believe missed the grip on the sword, so a little bit brown. I'll be using this brown on any pouches, so it's good to have some consistency. And then he's got these two little gems, so I think any gems that I find are going to be green, because again, another contrast. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching and have fun.